"Aye, my lord," said Jory. Ned's gaze swept over the city map again. "We also must deal with the Tyrells. If Renly truly commands their loyalty, we may face the combined forces of Highgarden. If that happens, we could be fighting a war on two fronts. Perhaps we could parley again," said one of Ned's advisors. "Try to sway Renly. Offer him a significant role in Stannis' new council." Ned pressed his lips together. "We can try. But if Renly's ambition stands firm, he won't accept anything less than the crown. We must be ready to fight him as well." Quiet spread through the room. War on all sides was a grim prospect indeed. A knock interrupted them. A soldier peeked in. "My lord, the small council chambers are ready. The highborn you summoned are gathered. Will you see them now?" Ned nodded, gathering his papers. He stepped out into the corridor, flanked by guards. Sansa was safe in her chambers, Arya with Syrio. Cersei, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen remained locked away under heavy guard. The black cells held Littlefinger, Pycelle, and a few others of questionable loyalty. Varys was still missing, but Ned suspected the spymaster would emerge when it suited him. Entering the small council chamber, Ned found it filled with a mix of anxious faces. Minor lords, wealthy merchants, a few surviving members of the old council who had chosen to bend the knee, and representatives of the city watch. They all rose in a show of deference when he entered. The seat at the head of the table, once the king's seat, was empty. Ned took the hand seat instead. He surveyed them, face solemn. "We find ourselves in extraordinary times. Our late king Robert Baratheon left no trueborn heirs. The boy who claimed the throne was born of incest between the queen and her twin brother. Now, by the laws of the realm, the rightful heir is Lord Stannis Baratheon of Dragonstone." Some heads nodded in agreement. Others remained still, their eyes wary. Ned went on, "Until Lord Stannis arrives, I act as regent. We must restore order to the city, protect the small folk, and prepare for the possibility of war." A corpulent lord cleared his throat. "What of trade, Lord Stark? The city depends on shipments from the Reach and the Stormlands. With the roads threatened by war, supplies will dry up, and the people may starve." "Then we must see that they do not," Ned said firmly. "Set aside grain in storehouses at fair prices. Encourage fishermen to supply the city. Any lords or merchants who hoard supplies in this crisis will face consequences." Another lord ventured, "What about the faith? The High Septon was quite supportive of the crown. Will he cooperate?" Ned pressed his lips together. "We will invite the High Septon to speak. He must hear the truth of Joffrey's parentage and the lawful claim of Stannis. We want the faith on our side, to calm the people's fears." A hum of uncertain agreement spread around the table. A slender man in fine robes, a merchant of some wealth, asked hesitantly, "And what of Queen Cersei and her children? Rumor says they are in your custody. They are accused of grievous crimes, but they are still highborn Lannisters. This city has seen enough bloodshed. Will they be tried, or simply executed?" Ned's voice was grim. "They will remain imprisoned until Lord Stannis arrives. He shall decide their fate as the rightful king. For now, they remain unharmed. No more bloodshed than necessary." That statement eased some of the tension in the room. Cersei had made many enemies, but House Lannister still had considerable power. The lords and merchants did not wish to see unchecked vengeance that could spark reprisals. The council continued for over an hour, hashing out the immediate governance of the city, the rationing of supplies, the patrols on the streets, the forging of new alliances. Ned listened carefully, issued orders, and tried to keep the peace among the fractious personalities. When the meeting finally adjourned, the lords and merchants departed, leaving Ned drained. He yearned for the quiet solace of Winterfell's Godswood, the old pines whispering in the northern breeze, the earth steady underfoot. But he was in King's Landing, the Viper's Pit, and he had to remain vigilant. He rose from the council table, stepping into the corridor. Torchlight flickered across the stone walls, and the air smelled of sweat and tension. Jory was waiting there, arms folded. "My lord," he said quietly, There's a matter you should attend to." "What is it?" Ned asked, fighting a wave of fatigue. "It's Ser Jaime Lannister. Word has come that he is attempting to rally men near the Westerlands. Our spies say he might try a lightning strike on King's Landing before Tywin's main host arrives. Some fear the Kingslayer might slip into the city with a small force to free his family." Ned closed his eyes briefly, weighing the possibility. Jaime was bold and cunning, a formidable swordsman. If he managed to free Cersei and Joffrey, all Ned's efforts might unravel. Then we must strengthen our watch. No one enters or leaves the city after sundown without scrutiny. "Aye, my lord," Ned continued, stepping into a corridor that led to a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. From here, he could see the sprawl of King's Landing below. Lanterns were beginning to glow in the windows. Smoke from countless hearths curled upward into the twilight. He could almost taste the fear in the air. He stood there, gripping the stone balustrade, letting the breeze brush his face. He thought of the crypts of Winterfell, the stone statues of his ancestors watching over their land. Would they approve of what he had done? He had forsaken the illusions that honesty and honor alone could triumph. He had planned a secret coup, smuggled in his bannermen, and spilled blood in the throne room itself. He had arrested a queen and her children. A voice inside him whispered that he had broken the old code of the North. But another voice insisted he had done what needed doing. The Lannisters' treachery demanded nothing less. As night fell, the city settled into a tense quiet. Patrols marched along the walls, their torches casting dancing shadows on the red stone. The wind carried the faint clang of steel and the rustle of banners. Ned remained on that balcony a long while, contemplating the uncertain days to come. The realm would not accept this shift without question. Tywin would rage. Renly would conspire. The Tyrells might seize their chance. And beyond the sea, rumors whispered of Daenerys Targaryen with dragons stirring in the east, though few took it seriously. And in the far north, beyond the wall, whispered other terrors. One step at a time, he told himself. The city was in his hands now, and the rightful heir, Stannis, would soon arrive to claim his due. If he could hold King's Landing until then, if he could gather enough allies, if he could keep the peace, perhaps the realm would not tear itself apart. That night, Ned slept fitfully, haunted by dreams of wolves and lions locked in mortal combat, of a boy with golden hair sneering at him while holding Sansa's severed head. He awoke sweating, heart pounding. He rose from bed, dressed in a simple tunic, and paced his chambers. His vow to protect his daughters was the only thing that mattered more than securing the throne for Stannis. That vow had driven him to orchestrate this entire plan. He opened the door quietly, stepping into the corridor. 2 guards, loyal men from the north, stood watch. They bowed their heads respectfully. "My lord, is something wrong?" "I just need some air," Ned said softly. He walked the corridors, the flicker of torchlight guiding him. His mind spun with all the possible treacheries. Had he truly accounted for Varys's cunning? For Littlefinger's sly manipulations, even from a cell? For the Tyrell ambitions, Renly's vanity, and Tywin's wrath? He was not a man made for such intrigues, but necessity forced his hand. Eventually, he found himself at the door to Cersei's makeshift prison chambers. Guards stood outside, arms crossed. They saluted Ned. He hesitated, then signaled them to open the door. He stepped inside. The room was sparse, just a bed and some furnishings. Cersei was seated by a narrow window, her hair unbound, her face pale in the moonlight. She looked up, eyes blazing with hatred. Ned said nothing at first, regarding the once proud queen who had moved the realm like pieces on a Sivas board. She looked diminished now, yet still dangerous, like a cornered lioness. "You," she spat, "come to gloat." Ned spoke quietly. "I came to see if you and your children are being treated fairly." She laughed bitterly. "Concern for your prisoners now, Stark? You should have thought of that when you orchestrated your little ambush." Ned kept his face impassive. "I gave you warning once. You didn't heed it." Cersei stood abruptly, crossing the room in a swirl of her nightgown. "You will regret this. Tywin will raze this city to the ground. The blood of your precious northerners will soak the streets. Lions do not forget insults." Ned's jaw tightened. "The realm knows the truth. Your children are not Baratheons. The line of succession is clear." She sneered, stepping closer until she was but a foot away. Her green eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "Truth? Did you think that would matter in King's Landing? Power is power. Do you truly believe your ragged northern host can hold this city against all comers? If they stand united behind the rightful king, yes," Ned replied, though part of him acknowledged her point. Cersei's lips twisted into a mocking smile. "Rightful king. Stannis has the personality of a lobster in a pot. The lords despise him. The small folk barely know he exists. He will come, yes, but do you think he will best Tywin or Renly or the Tyrells? The realm will burn with war, and you will have kindled the fire." Ned's anger flared. "I did not create the false claim. I did not murder the rightful king's father or orchestrate incest to seize the throne." Cersei's eyes flashed with contempt. "You are a fool. Once, maybe, I thought you an honorable one. But you surprised me with this cunning. How many men died so you could place that humorless Stannis on the throne?" The weight of that accusation settled on Ned's conscience, but he refused to yield. "More would have died under Joffrey's cruelty. I will not debate this further." Turning to leave, he paused at the door. He glanced over his shoulder, voice quieter. "I will ensure your children are not harmed. My quarrel is with you and your brother's deception, not Tommen and Myrcella's innocence." Cersei's posture tensed, but she said nothing more. Ned slipped out and shut the door behind him, the guards resuming their post. He returned to his chambers, ignoring the sour taste of that conversation. Cersei was vain, manipulative, and would kill to preserve her own children's claim. But her words still rang in his ears. The realm might well burn before this was settled. Yet, step by step, he would stand against the madness. At first light, Ned rose to a flurry of new reports. Sightings of Lannister outriders near the Rose Road, rumors of a Tyrell host gathering at Highgarden, and cryptic messages that Varys had been seen slipping into a back alley in the city. He sent men to investigate but doubted they would catch the spider so easily. He oversaw the fortification of the city gates. He conferred with Sansa and Arya, who seemed uneasy but determined to remain at his side. A week passed this way, every day a tapestry of cautious diplomacy and vigilant defense. The tension in King's Landing was like a drawn bowstring. One spark and it would be war in the streets. Yet for the moment, Ned's firm hand kept it from snapping. He used the gold in the royal treasury to buy grain for the small folk, ensuring bread was distributed, though at controlled prices, to stave off riots. He sent ravens to every corner of the realm. He prepared, as best he could, for Stannis' arrival. And then, on the 8th day since Ned's coup, a scout rode into the city, battered and breathless. He brought word. A fleet of ships under the fiery stag banner was approaching Blackwater Bay. Stannis Baratheon had come at last. Ned climbed the ramparts overlooking the bay, squinting into the midday sun. Far out on the sparkling water, sails with the sigil of House Baratheon glided forward. The dark hulls of the ships cut through the waves. Excitement and trepidation warred in Ned's chest. This was the moment he had worked toward. Stannis, the rightful king, was here to claim the throne. He gave orders to open the sea gates, but also to maintain a watchful guard. He did not know precisely how Stannis would react to the news of Ned's coup. Would he be grateful? Suspicious? As rigid as iron, Stannis might see treachery in every corner. By late afternoon, the first ships dropped anchor, and longboats ferried Stannis and his men to shore. Ned descended to the docks, accompanied by Jory and a contingent of loyal northern soldiers. A crowd of curious onlookers gathered at a respectful distance. Stannis Baratheon stepped onto the quay, tall and gaunt, his jaw set in a perpetual scowl. His cape bore the fiery red heart of his personal sigil, and the light of the late sun glinted off his polished breastplate. Behind him came a retinue of knights and lords sworn to Dragonstone, faces stern and resolute. At his side was the Red Priestess, Melisandre of Ashai, her red robes fluttering, her exotic looks drawing whispers from the crowd. Ned approached, head bowed in deference, then straightened. "Lord Stannis, welcome to King's Landing." Stannis scrutinized Ned with icy blue eyes. "They say you have taken the city in my name." "I have," Ned replied. "Joffrey Baratheon was not Robert's son. The Queen's treachery forced my hand. She was prepared to kill me to keep her secret. I seized the Red Keep with my men, arrested Cersei and her children, and proclaimed you the rightful heir." Stannis nodded once, a short, clipped motion. "So, you have done your duty at last, Lord Stark." His tone carried neither gratitude nor condemnation. It was as if he were stating a fact. "I have come to claim the Iron Throne by right of blood. Will you kneel?" Ned paused, glancing at the waiting crowd, then lowered himself to one knee. "I, Eddard Stark of Winterfell, do hereby swear fealty to you, Stannis Baratheon, rightful king of the Undulls and the First Men." The watchers murmured as Stannis extended a hand. Ned took it, rising. The rigid lines of Stannis' face softened slightly, and he inclined his head. "Very well." He glanced at the city around him, the walls, the ramparts manned by northern soldiers. "You have done more than many would dare, Lord Stark. Let us see the proof of Joffrey's illegitimacy, and then we shall proceed to the throne." Ned gestured. "I have all the evidence you require, Your Grace, and the false king and queen remain in custody." Stannis let his gaze flick toward Melisandre. She nodded, as though affirming some unspoken knowledge. Then Stannis faced Ned. "Very well, let on." Thus, Ned led him through the city gates into the Red Keep. Warily, the northern soldiers stood aside, letting Stannis and his retinue pass. The people craned their necks, whispering about the new king, about the improbable alliance with Stark. On they went up the winding roads through the courtyard and into the great hall. The Iron Throne, jagged and imposing, awaited them. Word had spread of Stannis' arrival, and the lords who had bent the knee to Ned waited in the hall, tension thick in the air. As Stannis approached the throne, Ned offered him the parchments, the records, the testimonies. Stannis scanned them briefly, though perhaps he already knew. Finally, he turned to face the assembled courtiers. "It is as Lord Stark has said. My nephew Joffrey is not trueborn. The Queen conspired against the realm. By rights, I am king. Those who deny this will be dealt with as traitors." A chorus of murmured assent came from the lords who feared Stannis' wrath. Others remained silent, uncertain of their new monarch. Ned spoke, voice carrying across the hall. "The false king and queen are in custody, along with their children. What would you have done with them, Your Grace?" Stannis regarded him levelly. "Bring them before me." Ned signaled guards to fetch the prisoners. Moments later, a contingent of northern soldiers entered, escorting Cersei, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. The children clung to each other, frightened. Cersei's face was pale but defiant, and Joffrey's eyes brimmed with hate. Cersei spotted Stannis and gave him a withering glare. Stannis studied them for a moment, and behind him, Melisandre's eyes gleamed with something like triumph. "I will deal with the Queen's crimes. The children shall be given a trial if the lords demand it." Cersei hissed, "You have no right." "I have every right," Stannis cut in coldly. "You allowed your bastard son to claim the Iron Throne, deceiving the realm. You will answer for your treachery." Joffrey's voice cracked. "I am the king." Stannis ignored him, turning to the assembled crowd. "Take them to the dungeons. They will remain there until I pass sentence." The guards dragged the protesting prisoners away. Ned felt no joy in the sight. This was justice, but it was also sorrow. The realm had come to this. Children locked in cells for their parents' sins, families at war. Stannis ascended the steps to the Iron Throne. He stood before it, hand resting on one of the twisted steel blades. Slowly, he sat, the metal seat reflecting firelight in ominous flashes. The hall fell silent. In that hush, Ned found his gaze lingering on the new king. Stannis was unyielding, as severe as the throne itself. The city had been seized, the false king deposed, yet the realm's troubles were far from over. The arrival of Tywin's armies loomed, Renly's ambitions simmered, the Tyrells might yet make a move, and the shadows of war stretched long. But for this moment, at least, Ned Stark allowed himself a small breath of relief. He had done what he set out to do. He had rescued his daughters, removed Joffrey from power, and given the throne to its rightful heir. The future was uncertain, but the North had a measure of control over its destiny now, and the realm might stand a chance against the chaos to come. As he stood beneath the Iron Throne, Ned thought of Winterfell and the crypts of his forefathers. Perhaps they would judge him for shedding honor to adopt cunning. But in the Game of Thrones, one either won or died. And this time the lone wolf had not died. He had struck first, swift and sure, for the sake of his family and the realm. He bowed to Stannis, whispering, "For the good of the realm," and rose to meet whatever new storm awaited on the horizon.